Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks for being here with us on this Friday afternoon, maybe Friday evening where you are, maybe even Saturday morning where you are. Wherever you are, we're glad you're spending the time with us. We've got 2 hours with Jimmy Akin today, and it's Ask Him Anything. If you've got a question for Jimmy Akin, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. But I was just telling Jimmy that a couple minutes before the show started, already all the lines were full. So people have questions for Jimmy Akin. Let me look right now. Yep, every single line full. So you'll just have to keep trying if you want to get in. We'll do our very best to get you on. 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. He's got a newer podcast, the Jimmy Akin podcast, and he's got that big one, that one of the most popular documentary podcasts anywhere. It's Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Welcome back, Jimmy Akin.
Howdy, how's it going, Si?
Really good for a Friday. It's going pretty darn good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
All right. The number is 888-318-7884. Jimmy, today it dropped a new episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. What was it?
Well, so as you mentioned, I've got this new podcast, the Jimmy Akin podcast, and it comes out guaranteed on Mondays. It may come out on some other days, but this Monday, I looked at a passage in Romans called the Golden Chain of Salvation, which is often talked about by Calvinists who believe that it proves the perseverance of the saints, the idea that if you're ever in a state of grace, you will always remain in a state of grace. So it denies the possibility of mortal sin. That's what they think it means. But I go through the Golden Chain link by link and show you why they're misreading this passage. So that was the Jimmy Akin podcast this week. Today's episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World is part 2 of our look at an early Christian apocalypse known as the Ascension of Isaiah. The first half of the book looks at the martyrdom of the prophet Isaiah, and the second half looks at Isaiah's ascension through the 7 heavens. And both parts include traditions about Jesus that are not found in the Gospels. And what's interesting about this book is it is a first century book. It looks like it was written about the year of AD 67. So it is earlier than the book of Revelation, and it is contemporary with the 4 Gospels, but it contains traditions about Jesus that are not mentioned in them. So it makes for a very interesting read.
Very good. Check it out. Mysterious.fm is where you can find Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, or just type in Jimmy Akin or Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. You'll find all these things that Jimmy has available. Or just give us a call, 888-318-7884. Chris did in Ohio. He's listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Chris, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. My question is in regards to making a valid confession. What is the necessary contrition one has to have? What is the necessary motivations for that contrition? And then what is the necessary resolution one has to make going forward?
Okay, so in terms of the necessary contrition, the technical term for the kind of contrition that suffices for a valid confession is attrition. Attrition is a repentance from sin based on something other than love of God. So it might be, for example, fear of punishment. And so fear of being punished is sufficient for making a valid confession. Also disgust at the character of sin, that could be a motive for attrition. That would be valid for confession. If you have rejection of sin based on love of God, because he's the highest, infinite, most lovable thing, then you have not just attrition, but what's known as contrition. And if you have contrition, or perfect contrition, it's often called, if you have perfect contrition, then you're actually forgiven before you even go to confession, but you still need to go to confession. So the motives for attrition can be just about anything other than love of God. I should note that contrition and attrition do not exclude each other. So you can have both forms of repentance. You can both reject sin because you love God above all things, and at the same time be afraid of punishment, and at the same time be disgusted by sin and things like that. So they're not mutually incompatible. In terms of what resolution you need going forward, you need to have a resolution by God's grace to resist sin in the future. Now, this does not mean, as the Vatican has pointed out, that you have to promise you're never going to sin again, or mortally sin again, because people know themselves and they know, I've got this besetting sin I've got to deal with. But it's sufficient if you reject that sin in the moment. So you say, I really don't want to do that again. I recognize I may get tempted and fall into it again, but as of right now, I really don't want to do that again. And I ask God to give me the grace to help me not do that again.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Is when we talk about attrition or contrition, and we're rejecting our old sins, aside from the motivation, we're rejecting them in the sense that we regret them, or we reject, or we just reject them as like we wish we wouldn't have done them, or is there a specific?
In the moment, we reject them in the sense, this is part of what attrition and perfect contrition are. It incorporates the resolution. So it is, in the moment, I wish I had not done them. I may even kind of on an emotional level kind of be glad I did, but as an act of the will, I turn my will away from them. I wish I had not done them in the past. I wish I will not do them in the future, even though I may have some emotional attachment to them in the present, or even though I recognize I may get tempted in the future. As of right now, I turn my will away from them and reject them.
Chris, thank you. I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you very much for the question. We have time to get another one in before the break. And Joseph is in Brooklyn, New York, watching on YouTube. Welcome, Joseph. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. Can you hear me?
Yep. What's your question?
Jimmy, I have a Protestant friend who said that St. Augustine said that when Jesus was talking about being born of water, that it was a physical rebirth, not baptism. Did St. Augustine actually say that?
A physical rebirth? You mean how would that work?
Yes. Protestants believe. Well, yeah, Protestants believe that when Jesus was talking about being born of water and spirit, that they believe that the water part was the breaking of the female amniotic sac when
fluid.
When
okay,
she gives birth.
So I just want to clarify this. I think you may have misspoken. You said a physical rebirth as opposed to a physical birth. And
right, I'm sorry,
first of all, this is not all Protestants. This is actually a comparatively small number of Protestants who hold this view. Most Protestants believe, just like Catholics do, that we are regenerated in baptism. And so this is not universally the Protestant view. Your friend obviously belongs to a tradition that is either Baptist or was influenced in its history by Baptists, because that's where you really get this view. In terms of, did St. Augustine say that the passage in John 3 about must be born of water and the Spirit, and the water referring to amniotic fluid, did he say that? Well, I would be very interested to see. I'd need a reference for that. Augustine wrote voluminous amounts of stuff, and he said different things in different places. And towards the end of his career, he even wrote a book called Retractations, meaning rewritings, where he would change what he had previously said a little bit in light of his more mature thought. I'm not aware of a passage where he does that. If he has one, it wouldn't mean that he rejected the idea of baptismal regeneration, because one of the things you find when you study early church fathers, including St. Augustine, is that they had what is called a polyvalent understanding of Scripture, meaning you could look at a passage and it can mean more than one thing. So just because he may, and I don't know that he did this, but if he looked at this text and saw in it a reference to physical birth, that doesn't mean that he rejected the idea of baptismal salvation. I would be astonished if he did that, because among other things, a number of years ago, I did a detailed study using computer software of every reference to this verse in the Church Fathers, and I could not find anybody who rejected the idea that it refers to water baptism. So I would be astonished if St. Augustine did, but I would have to see the reference to check it out. I would invite your friend, if you want to follow this up, to name the passage and look it up. And once you've looked it up, or if you can't find it, you could email us and let me know what the passage is so I can look it up, and then you could call back and we could examine it.
Joseph, we'll leave it there. I hope that that was helpful to you. And we have to take a quick break. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
This is Conversations with Consequences, where we delve deeper into issues affecting our church, our country, and our core, the family.
As Catholics, we need to be informed, aware, and able to talk through some of the tough topics that we're facing in our culture and in our world. Conversations with Consequences gives us the tools to do so.
It's not enough to pray. We have to be a light for the world.
Conversations with Consequences, tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. All the lines full at the moment. It's an Ask Me Anything today. You can call and ask Jimmy whatever you like. You don't have to be Catholic to call. Anybody can call. If you want to know about the Bible, you want to know about Jesus, you want to know about the sacraments, you've got a question about the moral life or anything else, you're welcome to call. As lines up, we'll get you on with Jimmy. 888-318-7884. There's a big sale going on at shop.catholic.com right now. It's the annual fall sale. And each year, everything is put on sale. Everything at shop.catholic.com from 10 to 25% off. In some cases, even more than 25% off. All you got to do is head over and take a look, see what you and they got everything there now. We got merchandise, we got Christmas gifts, and we got all the books and the CDs and the DVDs. And do we still have DVDs? Maybe I'm exaggerating. Digital products, I'll just call it that. Just go to shop.catholic.com and find out what's available and get your savings now. We're going up to Newfoundland, Canada now. Colin, watching on our website, Catholic.com. Glad to have you, Colin. Thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi. So within Catholic culture, how would it be received to include a future fictional Marian apparition as background world building within a work of science fiction, given that by, say, the 23rd century, we might expect there to be significant apparitions, maybe even on the moon or Mars, but at the same time, I could see it being a bit of a faux pas, as we don't want to introduce big ideas into things that are associated with Marian apparitions in culture. I would just be interested for your thoughts on the matter.
Well, as long as you're not doing a Dan Brown and trying to portray your fiction as if it's based on fact, which is what he did with the Da Vinci Code. It was a totally fictional premise, but he tried to portray it as if it was based on fact. Then the audience is not going to be confused about, oh, okay, there was a Marian apparition on the moon or on Mars or wherever. In fact, we would expect that to happen anywhere Catholics and other Christians who honor Mary go. And so, it would vary. The reaction would vary by individuals, but I don't think very many people would mind. In fact, I think a lot of them would appreciate seeing a Catholic presence, including via Marian apparitions in the future in the science fictional universe you write in. In fact, I've planned to do that myself. I'll tell you what I've planned, and of course you can't use it because this is my idea, but I have for years thought about writing a set of stories where we have not exactly a jump drive, but a means of traveling faster than light. And in this universe, on the very first usage of the drive to carry a human being, a Marian apparition occurred. And the way the drive works is it casts you up out of three-dimensional Einsteinian space into higher dimensions, and then you fall back down into Einsteinian space. And so the first astronaut to test pilot this drive, I was going to give him a mixed Hispanic and Chinese name, like Miguel Chen or something like that, because in the future we're going to have more and more, people from different ethnic backgrounds marrying. Miguel Chen, or whatever I would name him, had a Marian apparition when he was at the peak of his trajectory through these higher dimensions, and the Marian apparition became known as Our Lady of Highest Heavens. And Our Lady of Highest Heavens gave him a message of blessing to humanity from her son as mankind travels through these higher physical heavens. And the symbol of Our Lady of Highest Heavens, which then became a traditional symbol that you would see on any faster than light spaceship, whether the people were Catholic or not on the ship, was a tesseract, the three-dimensional image of a four-dimensional cube with the Virgin Mary within the tesseract. And so that was my idea for Our Lady of Highest Heavens. And so I think people would have a good reaction to that.
All right, Colin?
That's awesome. Though acclaimed Catholic apologist Jimmy Akin should know better than to make fun of renowned Dan Brown.
Yeah, his insect eyes might flash like a rocket.
Colin, I'm going to say thank you. Get to writing, man. You got a few more hours before midnight. This is prime time for a writer like yourself. Get to work, Jimmy.
And just to clarify, what Colin was referring to is a number of years ago there was a newspaper article that came out in a British newspaper. It was called "Don't Make Fun of Renowned Dan Brown," that viciously mocked Dan Brown's writing style, and it used. Because Dan Brown has a bunch of writing flaws. He's actually a terrible writer. I used to hang out on linguistics boards where the linguists would make fun of him because of how horrible his prose style is. And he would mix metaphors and say things like his insect eyes flashed like a rocket.
That is a great mixed metaphor, if you're doing it on purpose. Colin, thanks again. Let's go to Zach in Iowa now, watching on YouTube. Zach, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Okay. Today I was puzzled over Luke, the book of Luke in section 11.
You mean chapter 11?
15 through 23. I always found it odd that Jesus argued that Satan couldn't win by dividing Satan when it could easily be argued that, at least at the time, that Jesus was acting as a red herring, the demon was acting as a red herring. It waits for Jesus to shoo him away, it leaves, and Jesus looks like a hero, and hence the divine image of Satan being held up or encouraged again. I know he kind of covers that, whereas then a demon and would leave, come back, find where he
Okay,
resided.
Zach, I think I have the gist of your question. Let me have a shot at answering it. So you're asking about the passage where Jesus is accused of driving out demons by Beelzebul, the prince of the demons. And the people who are criticizing him in that way are making exactly the charge that you say. That's what they think. He's using demonic power to drive out demons. And Jesus says that is not the case. And to help us understand why it's not the case, he gives us an insight into how the demonic world operates. He says an army divided against itself, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And so if Satan casts out Satan, meaning if one demon casts out another, then Satan's kingdom is divided and it's going to come to an end. And so the basic idea he's got here is that the kingdom of Satan works like other kingdoms. And, they've got an army that does the bidding of the king, but if the army is fighting against itself, the kingdom is going to be unstable and fall. And so Satan is not stupid. He's not going to let his troops get into disarray and start fighting each other. Satan imposes order on his kingdom, because if he didn't, there would be a civil war in the demonic realm and his kingdom would fall. He doesn't want his kingdom to fall, so he imposes order on it the same way a human king doesn't want his kingdom to fall, because it gets into a civil war. And so human kings impose order on their kingdoms and their troops. And Jesus says the same thing is true of Satan. Incidentally, I actually talk about this in today's episode of Mysterious World, because as the prophet Isaiah is ascending through the seven heavens, he first has to ascend through the firmament where the demons live, and he sees the demons in conflict with each other. And this is one of the elements in the book that indicates it's written independently of the Gospels. It is very early, from before the Gospels were universally recognized as authoritative, because 3 of the 4 Gospels have this same passage. All 3 of the synoptics indicate that Satan imposes order on his troops, and yet the author of the Ascension of Isaiah takes an opposite view and thinks that the demons are up in the firmament fighting each other. So that's an indication that this book is extremely early, but it doesn't have the tradition that we find in the synoptic gospels, which is what we can have confidence in. Jesus knows more about the demonic realm and how it operates than any of us here on earth, and he assures us it functions like an ordered kingdom that is not in the middle of a civil war.
Zach, thank you very much for the question. I hope that was helpful to you. Our lines are full, so on we go. Elias is in Glendora, California, watching on YouTube. Elias, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Yeah, my question is, when it comes to noticing coincidences, I've been having a recurring thing where I notice certain combinations of numbers that I associate certain narratives, and I see them come repeatedly. I'm wondering, and sometimes it's even things that are just in my own mind, and I know the demons, from what I understand, according to Gabriel and Morris, they can't hear our thoughts. So I'm wondering, how is it that these coincidences occur? I can give you an example of, say, a license plate matches my odometer at a certain time, and then, just over and over. And how do I know, is this coming from heaven or from hell, or what is it? Or is it just the mind is able to pick up on a pattern through patternicity?
Okay, so we may hit the break here, and I may have to finish on the other side, but when it comes to spotting coincidences, most of them are just that. They are things that just happen to coincide, and there is no special meaning to them. When there is a special meaning that a person perceives behind a coincidence, it's what's known, based on the work of Carl Jung, as a synchronicity. But most coincidences, a synchronicity is a meaningful coincidence, but most coincidences are not meaningful. They're just random happenstance. When it comes to noticing them, regularly, there is a cognitive bias that comes into play known as confirmation bias. Confirmation bias occurs when you believe or expect something to happen, and then you tend to read things as confirming that. So there's a famous one for like noticing the number 11, and after people start noticing the number 11, it becomes reinforcing, and every time they encounter an 11, it pops up to the top of their consciousness as, oh, there's another 11, and they attribute significance to it. There's more to say, but I'll say it on the other side of the break.
I hope you can hang on. Elias will continue with Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live. We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Deepen your connection to the Church's holy days and seasons while you draw on the wisdom of the Church Fathers. Feasts of Our Fathers, the new book from Mike Aquilina and Adam Lucas, is a treasury of history, prayers, insights, and lessons that will bring you closer to the earliest of Catholic traditions. Take your prayer life and your solidarity with the Church, past and present, to a new level. Order your copy of Feasts of Our Fathers today at shop.catholic.com.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. Join me for Beacon of Truth today at 4 p.m. Eastern
on the next Beacon of Truth, praying for your enemies and Soulful Psalm 74.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Elias and Glendora on the line with Jimmy Akin. It's Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin this hour and next on Catholic Answers Live. And Elias wants to know what to make of coincidence. How should we think of coincidence as Catholics?
Yeah, so a lot of noticing coincidence is just down to confirmation bias. Once you've noticed this, you tend to keep, and you attribute some significance to it, you tend to keep noticing it. And it's just random. Now, that's not to say God can't, generate synchronicities or allow for synchronicities. It is possible. But I would say you need something really unusual, something that just appears to go beyond random chance. Having a license plate sync up kind of with your odometer. And, there's probably some letters in that license plate in addition to numbers, at least here in the U.S. And those letters probably aren't on your odometer. So this is just a partial match. And partial matches are going to be common. If something really, though, is off the charts, then it could have a paranormal explanation. That explanation could be God. It could, or his angels. It could be demons, but that's very unlikely. We don't have any. That's not a known mode of demonic behavior. In order to propose that something is demons, you need evidence that it's demons. And the way to do that is this something we know demons do, as opposed to just speculating it could be demons. And we don't know that demons arrange coincidences like this. That's not a historical mode of behavior that demons engage in. Elias mentioned that Gabriel Amorth said demons can't read our thoughts, and that is a common opinion among theologians going back to St. Thomas Aquinas. However, I personally disagree, because spirits are telepathic beings, and angels and demons they communicate by telepathy, and so you would expect them to be able to read minds. But and the arguments that they don't are based on a misinterpretation of a Bible verse that doesn't really mean what various theologians have thought. However, even theologians like St. Thomas Aquinas, who did think that demons can't technically read your thoughts, believed that they could deduce your thoughts based on observing your behavior. And today we know that our thoughts are mirrored in the neurology of our brains. And so, demons can see matter in ways that we can't. They can presumably read your brain patterns, what neurons are firing, just like an MRI could. So I don't think we can have any confidence that demons can't read our thoughts. They obviously can, even if they can't technically read our thoughts, they can do things that approximate reading our thoughts. But I just don't think we need to worry about that, because we have God's protection. And so we shouldn't be concerned about it. My first thought would not be demons in the case of an off the charts, totally not random chance coincidence. I would think maybe God did it, or because theologians like St. Thomas Aquinas and Pope St. Gregory the Great were open to what today would be called psychic functioning, like St. Thomas Aquinas was open to precognition, which he called natural prophecy to distinguish it from the supernatural prophecy that God gives. Maybe it's your own psychic functioning, especially if the coincidence doesn't seem to have any, religious orientation, because what God cares about is religion, and helping people out and things like that. And if something is really weird, but doesn't seem oriented towards helping you in some way, especially religiously, I would tend to think maybe it's just your own psychic functioning if it goes beyond random chance. But most of the time, coincidences are just random chance, and our noticing of them is fed by confirmation bias.
And I will leave that there, hoping that is helpful to you, Elias. Thank you very much for the call. We go now to, it must be Saturday morning in Seoul, South Korea. Not even 8 o'clock in the morning yet, and Luke is on the line. Hello, Luke. Welcome back. No?
Hello, Joe.
Oh.
Good morning.
Oh, this is Cy, and you're on with Cy and Jimmy. You got a question for Jimmy?
Oh, yeah. Good morning, Jimmy. Good morning.
Howdy.
All right, so Jimmy, I've got in a disagreement with a friend about Sunday masses. So basically, she moved to a new place, and according to her, the church is very far away from her. And when she attends, she doesn't get anything from the mass. So she told me that she's going to stop going for Sunday masses and maybe just listening to mass online. But I told her that it's compulsory, like it's obligatory for Catholics to attend mass every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So her dispute is that if she's going to the mass on Sunday and not getting anything, so she's just trying to keep like a man-made obligation, a man-made rule. So I didn't know the answer to give her for that. So yeah, that's my question.
Okay, well, Luke, I'm afraid I couldn't understand all of your question, but I'll do the best I can with it. So in the first place, your friend is thinking about Mass the wrong way around. She's thinking about it in terms of the only reason to go to Mass is for me to get something out of it. And that's a self-centered version of of going to Mass, where I need to get something out of it if I'm going to go to it. That is not what Mass is about. That is a backwards way of thinking about the Mass. The Mass is not about going to get something out of it, some feelings or whatever. The Mass is not about you. It's about God. The reason we go to Mass is to worship God. And yes, we also get some things out of Mass, like we hear his word and we receive prayers from others that we pray in union with. And of course, we receive Jesus Christ himself in the Eucharist. All of those are things that we get, but the reason we go to Mass is to worship God. And so she's thinking about Mass backwards, as if it's about getting something for herself, like certain feelings or things like that. And that's not what it is at all. In terms of why Sunday Mass or, Saturday evening Mass is obligatory, well, because worshiping God is a grave obligation. God is infinitely good. We owe him literally everything, and we need to testify to his worth because he deserves it. And we don't just worship God as individuals, because humans are social creatures. We're social animals. We're meant to worship God corporately. And that's why the Jewish people had the Sabbath ordained for them as a day for corporate worship of God. And that was a grave obligation for them. And in the same way, when Jesus rose from the dead, the apostles chose that as the day for corporate worship for Christians. And just as the Sabbath was a grave obligation, because it's just a grave obligation, we need to devote time to corporate worship. So for the Christian Sunday, it's a day of grave obligation, because that's how much God deserves our worship.
Luke, I'll tell you what, I think I'm going to continue to just leave it there and wish you a wonderful weekend, and hope we'll talk to you again soon. But boy, the lines are staying full. So on we go, and we come back here to Southern California, where Chris is watching on YouTube. Chris, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
You mean me?
Yes, you, Chris. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, Mr. Aiken, is it morally just for a government to outlaw collective bargaining, or even certain types of labor unions, such as public employee unions?
Well, the church wants to see everybody have a right to negotiate their situation with their employers, and that can be handled a number of different ways. It can be handled through individual negotiation, or it can be handled through collective negotiation. And so in the main, the church would support the existence of labor unions. However, that doesn't mean that there are no limits to that. If a particular type of labor union, or even a particular labor union that's not of a particular type, it's just one labor union, is being fundamentally disruptive that's harming the common good of society, then the state is not required, I would say, by Catholic moral theology, to support the existence of that labor union if it's fundamentally harming the good of society. Because the whole purpose of labor unions and individual negotiation, they're both meant to help the common good. And if in a particular situation or a particular class of situations, the common good is being harmed rather than helped, then you're not required to support the institution that is producing that harm. So, being strictly neutral here, if individual bargaining is harming the common good, then you could prohibit individual bargaining. And if collective bargaining is harming the common good, then you could prohibit collective bargaining in those situations. When it comes to a public sector labor union, I think there is an interesting argument that they actually do harm the common good, because they are negotiating with the government that has the power of taxation, and they can become very powerful and have an influence on the government that is independent of the voters. And through that, they can try to feather their own nests in a way that harms the vote in public. And so I think there's an interesting argument for outlawing public sector labor unions of government employees, but I haven't formed any firm conclusions about that.
You know what, Chris, thank you very much for that. We got to take a quick break. We will be right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley of the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Wings is a weekly newsletter that's packed with program information, features, and updates of all that's going on at EWTN. To sign up, go to EWTN.com, click subscribe, enter your name and email address, and you'll start getting your wings every week. Get your wings today. It's the weekly newsletter from EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest. There's a line open. It's the first time today we have a line open. So if you have a question for Jimmy Akin, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. We're going now to Levi in Virginia, listening on our website, Catholic.com. Levi, welcome. Go ahead with your question.
Hi. I'm sorry. Okay. What I meant to say was hi. The peace of Christ be with both of you, Cy, and with you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Levi.
What's your question, Levi?
Well. Oh, okay. Sorry. I didn't know we needed to cut to the chase.
Yep.
Well, Jimmy, first of all, I just want to say I'm a big fan of your work, but I'll go ahead and cut to my question.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy, I know that considering the fact that you do a lot of apologetics work, you would argue that the people who read this should look into and join the Catholic Church, correct?
If I'm doing my job right, yeah.
Okay. Well, I say this because as a Baptist who has been learning about the Catholic Church, studying about the church and church history, there is just one thing about even the possibility of conversion that's always just kind of thrown me off. And that is the church seems to go through a lot of struggles. Whether that be historically with the lead up to the Council of Nicaea and the Arian controversy, and even recent examples, take your pick. But it's this kind of thing of considering how shaky sometimes the church seems to be, whether that be holding to doctrinal standards, holding to moral standards, or whatever. What then would really be your argument to say, I understand that this seems shaky, but still, you should still become Catholic.
All right,
because it's this kind of thing.
I'm going to let Jimmy answer because that was a very clear question.
Well, so if I understand the premise of your question correctly, you note variability where there has been confusion in the church, including coming from some churchmen. You mentioned, for example, at the Council of Nicaea, and it's true there was confusion, including from some churchmen both before and after the Council of Nicaea, and that's not unique to that time period. It's all the way down through history. I would say a couple of things, at least a couple of things. The first one is this is not unique to the Catholic Church. This is everybody. You mentioned you happen to come from the Baptist tradition, and if you study the history of the Baptist tradition, you will find exactly the same thing. To cite just one memorable example, the Baptist churches in America split at the time of the Civil War, and they split over, among other things, the issue of slavery. And you had Northern Baptists who opposed slavery, whereas Southern Baptists tended to support it. And that was a major rift in the Baptist community. You look more recently and you see a liberalization in various parts of the Baptist community in the 20th century, where they become progressively more open to items that deviate from the historic Christian faith. And so this confusion in churches is not something that the Catholic Church ought to be singled out for. If it prevented you from becoming a Catholic, it should equally well prevent you from becoming a Baptist or a Presbyterian or an Orthodox or an anybody, because confusion is part of the human condition. And knowing that, what we need to do is figure out what Jesus wants. And when we study what Jesus wants, he wanted to have a church that was a visible institution. You can show this from the Gospel of Matthew, which contains the only two passages where Jesus actually mentions his church. It's Matthew 16 and Matthew 18. He wanted to have a church that's a visible institution, and we can tell from these passages that it's a visible institution that has an official membership, it has leaders, it has followers, it has excommunication. It has laws that the leaders are create and the followers are expected to obey. It's supposed to be founded on Peter in a unique sense, and it's supposed to go from the first century to today, because he says to Peter, on you I'm going to build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it, meaning my church is never going to die. So in order to find Jesus's church, we need to look for a visible institution that has leaders and followers and laws and excommunication that has existed since the first century and that is built in a unique way on Peter. And that just points to the Catholic Church. And then within that, we can recognize, okay, but there's going to be confusion, just like there was confusion in the first century, including among churchmen. You know, St. Paul talks about the false apostles and false preachers that were deceiving people even in the first century, and that has continued down through the ages. But what we've got is Jesus promising that the Holy Spirit will lead the disciples into all truth, and he himself promises, that's in John, and he himself promises at the end of Matthew that he will be with his followers, guiding them through to the end of the world. So you know, that's going to apply to his church. And so even if there are ups and downs and confusion at various points, Jesus has promised that he and the Holy Spirit are going to guide his church, and that's going to continue to the end of time. So once we've identified his church, we can be confident that he's still guiding it despite all of the confusion that Satan and just human fallenness can generate. If you'd like to read more about that, I have a paper on my website, jimmyakin.com, called Why Be Catholic? An Exercise for Evangelicals. It'll go through the basics of the argument that I just made in a lot more detail. So I'd suggest you check that out. Once again, it's called Why Be Catholic? An Exercise for Evangelicals. It's at jimmyakin.com. And also, I wrote a book called A Daily Defense, and I think we can send you that, and it deals with a lot of objections that you might like to see Catholic responses to.
Just all you have to do, if you'd like a copy of that book, A Daily Defense, just hang on the line. We'll get an address and we'll send it out to you. And thank you very much for the call. On we go.
I hope that helps, Levi, and please feel free to call me again.
I hope it helps as well, Levi. We're going to Steve in Pennsylvania now, watching on YouTube. Steve, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. Hi, Cy.
Howdy.
First-time
Hi.
caller.
Oh, well, we're happy you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've seen videos online of Calvinists arguing that the Book of Jonah is evidence against free will. What
really?
would be the Catholic argument against that?
Well, I can't tell you the Catholic argument because the church doesn't have a teaching on this, but I can tell you what I would say in response to it. The first thing I'd say is this is an experiment where you have one test subject. N equals 1. The number of test subjects equals 1 in this argument. And you can't build an inductive case based on one example. You would need loads of examples in order to build an inductive case, and this argument therefore has no evidential force. There's a second reason that the argument has no evidential force, and that is that there is a mismatch between what happens in the Book of Jonah and the Calvinistic understanding of causation. According to Calvinists, God gives people a grace that will unfailingly ensure that they turn to him and remain in a state of grace for the rest of their lives. Okay, that is not what's happening with Jonah. Jonah, there's no discussion of him being in a state of grace in that book. But more fundamentally, on the Calvinist understanding of how the will works, God operates on the will itself. He doesn't do things from the outside. Calvinists will frequently say that they believe in a form of free will that's compatible with divine determinism, and they'll say, you're not forced. God is not forcing you to become a Christian. He's not making you do anything you don't want to do. He's given you the desire to become a Christian, and then you just freely follow your greatest desire. Well, okay, so if God is operating directly on the human will and not, punching you around to get you to become a Christian, that doesn't fit what happens with Jonah. God tells Jonah to go to Nineveh. Jonah doesn't want to go to Nineveh. Jonah runs away, and then God has this whole series of external events to beat Jonah into going to Nineveh after all when he doesn't want to. And Jonah even complains at the end of the book, saying, I didn't want to come here. I knew you were going to be merciful to these people. Okay, so God is forcing Jonah to act against his will. Jonah doesn't want to be there. Jonah doesn't want to do this. But that's exactly not what Calvinists understand God to be doing with our wills. And so there's a fundamental mismatch between what happens to Jonah and what Calvinists say happened with our wills. And so those are the two main points I would make. Whenever you've got an experiment where you've got one test case, you cannot make an inductive argument on that. And there's a fundamental difference between the kind of causation that Calvinists hold happens with us and the kind of causation that happened with Jonah.
Steve, all that makes sense to you?
Yeah, that was really helpful.
All right. Well, Jimmy tends to do that. I'm glad you were here. Thanks. Hey, Father Tom in Iowa listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. I'm sorry, Father, but if you have to be quick if you'd like an answer from Jimmy this hour.
Hey, Jimmy, thank you. I just wanted to ask about how one would form their conscience in the church, and then if they have a formed conscience, could they, in good faith, if they follow their conscience, reject some sort of church teaching?
Okay,
so I'll need to be quick in this answer. The first thing I'd say is you want to read a document that came out in 1990 from the then Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. The document's title is Donum Veritatis, which means the gift of truth. And this document is about the role of the theologian in the church. And it talks about how to deal with doctrinal difficulties. So, the different steps that you need to go through in dealing with them. Fundamentally, it is possible for Catholics in good conscience to disagree with non-infallible teachings as an exceptional matter, but not as an ordinary matter. And there are certain steps you need to go through as part of that process, but they're described in more fullness in Donum Veritatis. And I think I heard the music coming there, so I better shut my mouth and let you go read the document.
Thank you, Father Tom.
Also, read my book, Teaching with Authority, because I go into all this there in even more detail.
Let's send him a copy of that, because I kind of gave him short shrift. I'm not so good with the clock on that one, Father, and I apologize. We'll be right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We continue with Ask Me Anything on Catholic Answers Live, and you should know that is open to anybody. Anybody can call if you've got a question. Certainly any question about the Catholic faith is welcome, but when Jimmy's here, Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour, anything's welcome. You got something you'd like to know about, you'd like to talk about with Jimmy, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. And I know I made that sound really encouraging, but now I have to follow that up with all the lines are full at the moment. So call throughout the hour. Lines do open up, of course, periodically, and we'd love to get you on the air with Jimmy. We just need to get a line open to do that. 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin, as I said last hour, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World and the new podcast, the Jimmy Akin Podcast, among many other things. Check out, if you go to YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, search Jimmy Akin Podcast and you can find the new one. Jimmy, ready for another hour?
Oh, sure.
All right, because as I was saying, lines are so... We had one line open for 20 seconds last hour. Other than that, they just continue full. Let's just go right back to the phones then. Ken's in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Glad you're here, Ken. Go ahead with your question.
Hi. The reason I'm calling is something that's been on my mind lately.
What's that?
I was wondering why Judas was necessary as far as betraying Jesus. I mean, think about it from, at least in my thoughts, Jesus was really famous around the time. And then I could see where they needed Judas to take him to Gethsemane, but I don't understand why Judas had to point him out at that point, because you'd think when they got to Gethsemane, they'd say, yeah, that's him over there, yeah. And I'm just wondering why Judas was needed to point Jesus out to people who I would think would know already what he looks like.
Okay, well... strictly speaking, Judas was not necessary, but, God could have done this some other way. But God chose to use Judas in this situation, and the Catechism says that in the predestination of Jesus to go to the cross, God incorporated the free will choices of the people who were involved. And so that included Judas and the Jewish authorities and the guards that were sent to arrest Jesus. Now, one of the things about Jerusalem at the time of Passover is it had an absolutely enormous population. Because of all the pilgrims who came. This was one of the 3 annual pilgrimage feasts where observant Jews were expected to come to Jerusalem for this. And so some in the Jewish diaspora in foreign lands couldn't make it, but a lot of them did anyway come. And so you had all of the Jews from, Israel, from Judea and Galilee and so forth. They were coming, as well as loads of Jews from foreign lands. And Luke talks about that in Acts chapter 2. He gives us a list of where people were coming from. And we know from other sources like the Jewish historian Josephus that the city's population just jumped hugely at Passover to like 1.5 million people, which is amazing, if I remember the number correctly, which is amazingly huge for any ancient city. And that means that it was hard to find people if you didn't know where they were going to be. And it also means there were a lot of people who looked alike, especially in the dark. And so the Jewish authorities, as Jesus himself points out, could have taken him when he was out publicly teaching during the day. But the Gospels tell us they didn't want to do that because they were afraid if they did that, it could provoke a riot among the people because the people regarded him as a prophet. So they didn't want to take him openly. They wanted to take him in private when there weren't a lot of people around. And that means they would need to know where he would be, not during the day, but at night. And that's hard when you've got a huge number of pilgrims who are all divvying up to go eat the Passover at different places. And so they needed Judas to guide them to where Jesus would be on the night of betrayal, which was Passover. And Judas knew where he had learned where Jesus was going to eat the Passover. But there's a very interesting thing in the Gospels where in the 3 synoptic Gospels, Jesus doesn't let the disciples know where that's going to be until the last minute. He's apparently arranged it on his own. He's made arrangements to eat the Passover at a particular guy's house, but he doesn't tell the disciples until they have killed the Passover lamb. And then they say, well, where do you want us to eat the Passover? And he sends 2 of the disciples, Peter and John, Luke tells us. He says, go into the city. You'll find a guy carrying a water jug on his head, which is unusual because fetching water was women's work at the time. And you'll find this guy doing it. Follow him. And when he goes into a house, ask the householder, not the guy with the jug, ask the householder, where is the room for me to eat the Passover meal with my disciples? And so what this has the effect of is not even the disciples know where they're going to eat the Passover until the last minute. And the apparent reason for that is Jesus really wants to eat this Passover with the disciples. He says as much, I've greatly desired to eat this Passover with you. And he institutes the Eucharist. And because the disciples didn't know until the last minute where they were going to be eating it, Judas had no opportunity to go off and betray him and say, here's where he's going to eat the Passover. You can bust in while he's doing that and arrest him. And so Judas has to, from the dinner, he knows they're going to go to the Garden of Gethsemane afterwards. And so during the dinner, Judas leaves to say, hey, he's going to be at the Garden of Gethsemane like he usually goes to. He's going to be there after the dinner, and you can arrest him then. And he says, whoever I kiss is going to be the guy. Well, so then they send with Judas an armed squad to arrest Jesus, and maybe some of the armed squad recognized him, but this is in the dark and they're doing stuff by torchlight and moonlight. And so it can be hard to recognize someone if you don't actually know that person, if all you've got is torches and moonlight. And so that it thus makes sense for Judas to go up and kiss Jesus, which was a common greeting at the time, so that the guards who he brought there would know which one of the people in the garden is actually Jesus. They don't want to arrest the wrong guy, which you might do if you're dealing with someone you don't really know personally and it's dark and all you've got is torchlight and moonlight.
Ken, what a great question to get us started with this hour. Thanks so much. We're going to take a quick break. Right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
EWTN Radio Essentials is now EWTN Radio Extra. It's the past, present, and future of Catholic radio. You'll hear classic programs from Mother Angelica and Dr. Scott Hahn, plus timeless devotionals and award-winning podcasts from our partners on EWTN's Podcast Central. Listen now to EWTN Radio Extra on the EWTN app, on smart speakers, and on EWTN.com.
Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour on Catholic Answers Live. Your calls welcome, but lots of folks on the line right now, so we're just going to keep Jimmy working. We'll just keep him working throughout the whole hour. Here's John Paul in Berkeley, California, watching on YouTube. John Paul, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello, thank you very much.
I want to start by saying that I am Catholic, and I'm actually writing a book about the permissibility of abortion, against the permissibility of abortion.
Okay.
I'm actually going to ask quite a loaded question here, so please bear with me for a second.
Just keep
I'm sure
it
you're
clean.
familiar with the violinist argument.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to bring up like a sort of variation of this argument. So first we assume that the child in the womb is a person just as much as any adult human being. And then we can imagine a mother and her 8-year-old child in a scenario where the 8-year-old child has a kidney ailment such that he needs someone else's kidney to survive. The mother is the only person with a kidney that would suffice to save the child's life. Does the mother have a moral obligation to donate her kidney? Now, this isn't my question, but what I wanted to bring up is that one common response that I hear to this question is that it is not morally obligatory because the mother's kidney is for her, but her uterus is for the natural purpose of fostering children. However, I'm not quite sure that this response is sufficient in showing that abortion is impermissible, as it seems to commit the appeal to nature fallacy, which is to say just because something is within nature does not make it right. Viruses are obviously not a good thing, but they are within nature. And under this logic, would it then be
Except for the
impermissible
good
to say,
viruses.
like,
There
under
are
this
good
logic, would
ones.
it then be impermissible for a man to say, for him to blind himself or cover his ears or walk with his hands? It seems that it's not simply enough to say that the purpose of the uterus is for fostering of children to show that abortion is impermissible. You'd have to show why that would make abortion impermissible. So then my question is, why is the uterus being for the purpose of fostering children enough to say abortion is impermissible?
Well, I don't think that saying the uterus is for purposes of fostering children is the reason abortion is wrong. The reason abortion is wrong is it's killing an innocent human being. And that's the fundamental wrong. I in my own apologetics, I never appeal to the purpose of the uterus with respect to abortion.
Okay, but in the example where the child needs the kidney to survive, not giving the kidney would essentially mean that you're letting the child die. And most people would seem to say that it's not morally obligatory to do this. So it would seem that you're saying that the uterus being for the purpose of fostering children is not a reason for why abortion is impermissible, or at least is not a response to this. What would your response then be?
Yeah, so I should mention what the argument you're basing this on is for people who may not be aware. There was a paper that was written in 1971 by a philosopher named Judith Jarvis Thompson, who I've actually met. It was called A Defense of Abortion, and in it she has a thought experiment where a famous violinist is hooked up to someone against that person's will who has a kidney that the violinist needs to use in order to survive. And they're a very valuable person because they're such a famous violinist. And the question is the woman within her moral rights to disconnect the violinist rather than be inconvenienced by having this violinist hooked up to her? If I understand your parallel argument correctly, it's a mother who needs to donate a kidney to one of her own children. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I would say all things being equal, so, they can afford it and it's not going to cause worse health problems. I would say the mother is obliged to donate her kidney to her child, even if she's the only one. I would, if I was a mother and I have 2 good kidneys and I can survive with one of them, and my child is going to die without one of them, and I can save my child by giving him a kidney, I'm going to give him the kidney, and I'm going to feel like that's a moral duty I have. All things being equal, that we can afford it. There's not some competing problem that this situation is going to generate. As if I can donate a kidney and not be seriously inconvenienced myself and save the life of my child, I'm going to say, heck yeah, I'm morally obliged to save the life of my child.
All right. Thank you for the response. So on that note, I would guess I would follow up by saying, should we create a law then that would enforce this principle?
Well, so in this case, I'd have to think about that. My inclination is to say no, but the situations are disanalogous. You're in the first case, the case of the donating a kidney, you would be requiring someone to take a positive action to save the life of their child, and in the second case, you're directly killing the child in the abortion case. So I would say it's easier to see why there should be a law against directly killing someone compared to a law compelling positive moral action.
John Paul, going to leave it there because, as I've said, the lines are full. So on we go. Good luck with the book. I hope that goes well. And John is in Oregon watching on YouTube. John, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, Jimmy. How you doing?
Howdy. I'm doing fine.
Good. My question is about this notion that's kind of showing up in a lot of non-denominational circles, at least in this area. I don't know about other places in the country, but at least here in Oregon. And it's been brought up a lot about a one world order or one world religion, and the Pope is supposedly behind it all and is going to be the head of it, and it's going to have its own currency, and it's supposed to in some way usher in the end times. I've heard this from people who are, post-trib rapture people, pre-trib, even mid-trib people say the same thing. I'm wondering if you've heard of anything about this, and where does it come from, and kind of what is the Catholic, can I say, in defense of it, especially like in defense of the Pope? I mean, I know about how to defend against people that say that the Pope is the Antichrist. Like, that's a pretty easy thing to disprove. But this one world religion thing, where I'm not sure where it came from, and, to kind of learn how to defend against it, you have to learn where it comes from and what they actually believe or where the origin's from. So
right. So the answer is that this comes from the Book of Revelation, and it's from their reading of the Book of Revelation, because it says in Revelation that there are going to be these two great beasts. They're introduced, for example, in Revelation 13. One of them, the beast from the sea, is basically a world ruler that persecutes Christians, and it has a mark, which is 666, and then the second beast, which it says has two horns like a lamb, compels the people of the world to worship the beast and take its mark, everybody except the Christians. And so people coming from a dispensationalist premillennial background will say this part of the Book of Revelation applies to our future, and so the beast from the sea and the beast from the land, the one that has the two horns like a lamb, they're future figures, and this is going to apply to the whole world. And so if everyone in the world except Christians is going to worship the beast, then that must result in a one world religion. And so how could a one world religion happen? Well, it would obviously have to have the involvement of the Pope, they would argue, because he's a major world religious leader. Some of them who might say that the Pope himself is the Antichrist would see the Pope as the head of this, both the government and the religion, because they believe there's going to be a one world government because of the beast from the land, and a one world religion because the beast from the sea, and a one world religion because of the beast from the land. And so if those who would identify the Pope as the Antichrist would say he's the beast from the sea. Not everybody in the Protestant world says that, though, or even the dispensational premillennial part of the Protestant world. The more common view is that the Pope may be a candidate to be the beast from the land who will encourage people to worship the Antichrist. But nevertheless, because he's a prominent religious leader, He must be involved in this somehow. And so he would play a role in encouraging religions to merge as part of a setup for the eventual introduction of this one world religion. And maybe the Pope will even be the head of it. That's where this comes from. All of that is nonsense. In the first place, just to point out something that gets neglected by the people who spin these kind of theories, how do you know the Pope is going to agree to any of this? The Pope he may encourage religious, people of different religions to dialogue with each other and to get along and to not cause wars. But the Pope is the representative of Jesus Christ. If Jesus isn't the way, the truth, and the life, the Pope has no job. And so, if any Pope who's a genuine Christian is given the proposition, let's start worshiping a world leader as God, he's going to say, heck no. And if he's driven underground and martyred like the early popes were, who actually confronted emperor worship, he would do that. So the idea the Pope's just going to go along with this is nonsense. The Pope would be willing to accept martyrdom rather than go along with this, just as has been illustrated by numerous previous popes when the Roman Empire was trying to enforce emperor worship. Okay, that leads to our second point. This part of the book of Revelation does not refer to our future. It refers to the early centuries. Specifically, it refers to the period before the Roman Empire had converted, and the beast from the sea is a representation of the line of Roman emperors, and the mark of the beast is accepting emperor worship. Now, I can make those assertions in a short space. I can't argue for all of them in a short space. But if you go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy Akin, and you look up Mark of the Beast, you'll find several resources I have there that talk about this in more detail. I also have some 20 answers, little books that deal with the book of Revelation and how it's to be interpreted, as well as other passages of biblical prophecy. And you could check those out for more information as well to get the evidence that supports the views I just articulated.
John, thank you. I'm moving quickly between calls just because there's so many of them today. David is in Michigan listening on 990 AM. David, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi. It's a pleasure. I've been listening for about an hour now on the radio, and I heard you talk about Dan Brown and how you don't like his works. I was curious. Someone that finds the Da Vinci Code movie and the book both pretty fun, if nothing else. Was curious about why what your opinion is on that. A more in-depth answer.
Okay, so there are two principal reasons. The first one is Dan Brown is a deceptive author. As I mentioned when someone else was talking about this last hour, Dan Brown tried to convince his audience that the Da Vinci Code is based on fact. It is not. It is based on a set of ridiculous claims that are not supported by the historical evidence, ridiculous and sensationalist claims that stem from a work known as Holy Blood, Holy Grail by a trio of British authors known as Bagent, Lee, and Lincoln. And it contains material that is contrary to the Christian faith, and Dan Brown took that material and then used it to make huge amounts of money by convincing people that these items that are contrary to the Christian faith are credible, when in fact they are not. So he is a deceptive author that deceived tons of people. And that's the first reason I don't like him. By the way, I have an episode of Mysterious World on Holy Blood, Holy Grail. So if you go to youtube.com/Jimmy Akin and you type in Holy Blood, Holy Grail, you can watch that episode and it'll explain the problems with it. The second reason I don't like him is because he's a terrible prose stylist. He is just awful when you really sit down and study his prose and compare it to competent prose stylists. If you Google the article, "Don't Make Fun of Renowned Dan Brown," you'll find it. I actually reposted it on my own website, jimmyakin.org, so you can read that. That's a parody of his writing style, but when you read it, it gives you a sense of just how terrible Dan Brown's prose is. But if you'd like to see linguists actually tearing it apart, there's a post at a website called Language Log from May 1st, 2004, called the Dan Brown Code. And so just Google Dan Brown Code 2004 Language Log. That'll pop up. And you can read a professional linguist doing a takedown of how horrible Dan Brown's prose style is. Also, if you just Google Dan Brown style mistakes, a bunch of other people chiming in on the problems with him stylistically will also appear.
David, thank you for the question. Man, these lines just will not stop. We got lots more questions to come. Jimmy Akin is our guest. It's Ask Me Anything on Catholic Answers Live, and there is more to come right after this. What was the church like in its infancy? In a word, Catholic. And Joe Heschmeyer has the receipts. In his best-selling book, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, he gives you the details from the historical records of the first 2 centuries of Christianity. Right now, get a copy for just $10, plus free shipping if you live in the continental United States. Get more information and order The Early Church Was the Catholic Church at theearlychurchwascatholic.com.
Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or visit whywearecatholic.com.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
I'm Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. Join me for Beacon of Truth today at 4 p.m. Eastern
on the next Beacon of Truth, praying for your enemies and Soulful Psalm 74.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Little bit of groovy music for you on a Friday afternoon. I know what you're thinking. Isn't that Thursday afternoon music? But no. Jimmy moved to Friday afternoons, and the groovy music moved with him. Jimmy's here. We've got lots of folks on the line. It's Ask Me Anything today, and we're going next to Perrysburg, Ohio. Perrysburg, Ohio, where Angel is listening on Annunciation Radio. Angel, welcome. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask, I'm engaged to a person who's high level in the military, and about 2 months into the relationship, I started having episodes where I would literally see and feel a soldier and know his name and be right in front of me, and I would tell him, and I would say, who's Phoenix, who's Blair? They're right in front of me, and they're talking to me. And he would say, how do you know these things? And he still says it to me. It's still happening. It's happened maybe 15, maybe 20 times. And he's totally shocked because these guys have usually just been killed. Sometimes I've even seen how they've been killed. Why is this happening? I'm just wondering what's happening to me.
Okay, well, the first thing I'd say is in order to give you a more confident answer, I'd have to ask a whole bunch of questions. I'd need to do an investigation on this. I am able to do that. I'm a certified paranormal investigator. I've taken classes and passed them. And so if you ever want me to, look at this in more detail you could email me at jimmy@catholic.com. Based on just what you've said, it seems now whenever we look at a paranormal experience, that is one that goes beyond what's considered normal in our culture, and this would qualify as paranormal, the first thing to do is try to think through all the possible explanations that could result in what's being reported. And a lot of those would be natural, and we want to consider the possible natural explanations first, because normal phenomena are more common than paranormal phenomena. Based on what you've said, it doesn't sound like there are any good normal explanations for this. For example, random chance is not a good explanation for it, because you couldn't randomly guess the names of a whole bunch of people who have just died that your husband knows, or your fiance knows. So if things are as you describe, and that's one of the things I'd have further questions about, but if things are as you describe, I would say this sounds like a paranormal event. So the questions then would be, what kind of paranormal event is it? It could, now, these people, if they've just recently died, are speaking to you in what's known as an after-death communication, or ADC. After-death communications are astonishingly common. People tend not to talk about them, but when studies are done, 40 to 50% of people in the general population report having at least one, and sometimes multiple, after-death communications at some point during their lives. And so the question, so that these could, if it's, and they tend to happen shortly after people die. So it could be that these are just after-death communications that normally happen after someone dies. The question would be, why are they happening to you when you weren't the person who knew these individuals, instead of happening to your fiance? And my first guess answer, if this is all just paranormal, would be because you're more sensitive. You're more open to hearing from these. You may have a greater degree of mental openness to receiving these messages than your fiance does. And so even though they might like to talk to your fiance, he may be closed to them in a way that you're not, and so they talk to you instead. That would at least make sense to me. Now, everything I've just said up to now could happen in terms of natural human causation, where nothing beyond natural human abilities are involved. That would mean that psychic abilities are real. The church has no teaching on whether psychic abilities are real. There have been, as I mentioned last hour, theologians like St. Thomas Aquinas and Pope St. Gregory the Great who believes that they are real. And so just as natural human abilities that God built into human nature. So that could explain what's happening with you. On the other hand, sometimes God takes the initiative and sends people who, spirits who have died, whether they're saints or in purgatory or whatever else, he allows them to have communication with the living. So it's possible that God also could be responsible for these communications you've been receiving. Hypothetically, it could also be a demon is trying to mess with you. But in the case of a demon, you need evidence that a demon is involved, and you haven't mentioned any. Also with God, if God is doing this, then there should be some special purpose behind it. And that would be something that I'd have to dig further into by asking you more questions. And like, so what are these individuals telling you? Is there a consistent theme that comes through? But absent any information like that, rather than proposing a demon or proposing God is responsible for this, it sounds like after-death communications to me. And those are very common, and it could be you're getting them because you have a greater talent or a greater degree of openness for receiving them than your fiance does. But if you'd like a more confident opinion, I'd have to do further investigation, and you can email me at jimmy@catholic.com if that's something you're interested in.
Okay, Angel?
Yes, I would. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank
I
you.
have one real quick question. One night, I dreamt that he dropped his rifle. My fiance fell to the ground, and another man stood in front of him and took the bullet, and another person had a bomb hit him. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. I woke up at 2:00 in the morning. I was like sick all over, and I talked to him, and he said, I told him exactly what happened. He said, how did you know that it's exactly what happened to me? These two men saved my life. And he told me exactly what happened, which was exactly what I saw in my dream. And I woke up really violently sick because I could feel the chest pains and the whatever it was they were going through.
So you said you had a real quick question about this?
That's what I was just wondering. Why did I dream that? Why did I know that?
Okay. Okay, gotcha.
Well, it could be an after-death communication. The spirits, to prove, that they're who they say they are, could have given you this dream. After-death communications frequently occur in dreams, and they could have shown you how they saved your fiance's life as a way of giving you evidence that you could give to your fiance so that he would have confidence in that's who you're talking to, because only a limited number of people would have known about this experience.
Angel, thank you very much. I hope you will reach out to Jimmy. It's a fascinating story. I'm glad you called. We have full lines. On we go. Hector in Hayward, California, watching on YouTube is next. Hector, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, thank you for your time.
Oh, we're happy to have you, Hector.
My question is, which English Bible translation do you consider the most accurate to the Greek and Hebrew? And I would like to get your thoughts on the NASB and the ESV, like ignoring Bible commentaries. I know they're not Catholic Bibles, but I have researched them quite a bit, and I own a New American Standard, and I tend to use it as my primary Bible. But I do know they're negatives, but I wonder if these could be more useful for study.
Yeah, so I generally... I don't have a Bible that I think is the most accurate to the original languages. There are a wide variety of Bibles that are all quite competent. Now, I tend to have a preference for Bibles that are that use a translation philosophy known as formal equivalence as opposed to dynamic equivalence, especially for study. For study, you want those formal elements in there to preserve aspects of the original languages that can be important. For Bible reading, if all you want to do is read it, like quickly for the sake of comprehending the story, well, then dynamic equivalent translations are fine because they're easier to read. But if you really want to do Bible study, I tend to prefer formal equivalence. But my attitude is, why pick one? There are lots of good ones. I use Bible software, and I've got, couple, 3 dozen translations. There are certain ones I tend to go to more than others. I tend to use the Revised Standard Version. I tend to use the English Standard Version, the ESV that you mentioned. Sometimes I'll use the New American Standard Version, or NASB. I also tend to use the Lexham Bible translation. That's a very literal one that's published by Logos Bible Publishers. I tend to use the Young's Literal Translation, which is a hyperliteral translation, or I'll just go to the original languages. But in terms of translations, those are some of the ones I use. If I'm looking for something more on the dynamic end, I often use the New International Version. But there are others, like the New Jerusalem Bible, that are fine, that are dynamic. I'll also, just because it's common in Catholic parishes, I'll often check out what the New American Bible, not the New American Standard Bible, but the New American Bible, or NAB, says. But I don't tend to have it as my go-to for serious Bible study because it's a little more dynamic than I would like.
Hector, if you're interested, I'd like to send you a copy of Jimmy's book, The Bible is a Catholic Book. It goes into lots of stuff about the Bible, as a matter of fact, and you might enjoy it. And if you'd like it, all you have to do is hang on the line and give us an address. We'll send it out to you. Got to take a quick break. Right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Catechism in a Year with me, Father Mike Schmitz, is now available right here on Catholic Radio. Encounter God's plan of sheer goodness for us, revealed in Scripture and passed down through the tradition of the Catholic faith as we journey together toward our heavenly home.
Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific on EWTN Radio.
Catholic Answers Live, Jimmy Akin, our guest, and a few minutes left and a few calls left, so we'll go back to the phones and let Jimmy answer questions. We'll go to Georgia now. Michelle, listening on 91.1 FM in Georgia. Glad you're here. Michelle, go ahead with your question.
Hello.
Hi, Michelle. You're on the air with Jimmy.
Yes, hi. Thanks for taking my call. Do you know, or I would like to hear your thoughts on, do our deceased loved ones, can they recall the pain and suffering that they endured while they were with us live?
Well, in order for them humans have memory, and so our memories are not perfect, especially in this life. We can forget things, but we also remember them. And I would say everything else being equal, we would expect our departed loved ones to have the same kind of memories that we do. However, and that would include remembering, pain that they experienced in life. I mean, I can remember pain I've experienced in life. A few weeks ago, actually a few months ago now, I was trying to step over a barrier and I tripped and I fell face forward and blocked myself with my hands, and especially my right arm hurt like heck after that for some time. And I remember that pain. It doesn't bug me, but I remember not now. I'm fine now, but it's something I remember. And in the same way, if our departed loved ones are with God in heaven, they may well remember just like we remember past pain, they may well remember pain too. But if they're with God in heaven, it's not going to bug them. Now, all of that is assuming that they have the same kind of memory they do, but there's reason to think their memories may be better than that. For one thing, they're with God. And so that could at least lead you to speculate that they're going to have even better memories. But we actually have some evidence for this, because one of the things that parapsychology studies is the survival of bodily death, and that includes near-death experiences where people have, for example, clinically died. They've gone into cardiac arrest, and then they continue to have conscious experiences. And one of the things they report is having a lot more information than they had in this life. They will report suddenly knowing stuff. They would just have to think of, I'd like to know about this, and suddenly they know all about it. Well, one of the things that they also report as part of having a lot more information is they have what's called a life review in the literature. A life review is where someone, you've heard this saying about someone's life flashing before their eyes. Essentially, that's what a life review is, where the person has a detailed memory of everything that happened to them in their life and how they acted and how it affected everybody else. So one of the things that people who've had a life review report is suddenly understanding why people did things and have an empathy for them. Because in this life, you may not know, what another person was dealing with. All you may know is that they hurt you. But in the life review, it's like, oh, now I understand. They were dealing with this other issue, and that's why they acted the way they did. And they come away with a much more empathetic understanding of other people. Well, then in a near-death experience, the person comes back, say the doctors are able to restart their heart. But if near-death experiences are indicative of what happened with deceased people in general, then they would have, this knowledge of everything that happened to them during their life, but it would be framed in this very empathetic, understanding way. And that would include any pain they experienced in this life.
Okay, Michelle?
Okay, great. Yeah, that gives me great peace.
Good.
Because I find myself asking my mom for forgiveness for her last 2 years that were really hard. And I'm hoping that she can understand that.
If your mom is with God,
for her as much as you wanted to.
Yeah, if your mom is with God or on her way to God, then she understands, even if you weren't able to care for her the way you wanted, she understands, what you were dealing with and that you were trying. And, you've already asked for forgiveness. If you're a Catholic, you can also go to confession if you think that's needed. But one thing you can be confident of is your mother's love for you, whether she showed it in this life or not. If she's with God or on her way to God, then she loves you and she doesn't want you to beat yourself up about this.
Michelle, thank you. Thank you very much for the call. I'm glad that gave you some peace. Call back again if more questions come. I'm going to keep moving to try to get to everybody. Yasmin is in Salem, Oregon, listening on the great Modern Day Catholic Radio. Yasmin, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm going to try to formulate my question.
All right.
Good.
We always say that God has a perfect plan for us even before we are born, and He knows us before we are born. My question is, we know a lot of people that get pregnant just to give the babies away for bad things like sex trafficking and all of that. Why God doesn't prevent that?
Okay. So since you're asking why bad things happen to people, bad things are evil. In philosophy and in theology, there are two kinds of evil. One is sin, that's moral evil, and the other is suffering. That's physical evil. And they often go together because sin causes suffering. So why would God allow evil in the case of these children? That's a subcase of a more general problem that's known as the problem of evil. Why does a good God allow evil? Whether it's children suffering or children being the victims of sin or both, why would God allow that? Well, this is a big topic. And I've actually, given talks on this, and I think we have a DVD or a talk you can purchase at shop.catholic.com where I go into this in detail. I also believe I have a talk specifically on the problem of suffering at my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Jimmy Akin. So if you go there and you type in, I think the title is like, If God is Real, Why Do I Suffer? And you can watch that for free. But the general answer, just to give you a general answer now, is the Catechism teaches that God would not allow any evil unless He was going to bring about an equal or greater good out of that evil. And so we see an example of this in Jesus dying on the cross. Killing the Son of God, that was a great evil. But out of it, God brought the great good of salvation for the world. And in the same way, when we suffer, whether we're children or adults, God will bring about a great good in the future. We sometimes in this life can figure out what that good is, But in other cases, we can't because we have a limited perspective in this life. But we can still be confident. It's kind of like we're in the position of a small child whose parents take the child to the doctor to get an injection so that the child will not get a horrible disease. And the child doesn't know about the horrible disease. All the little child knows is my parents, who were supposed to love and protect me, are letting me be held down by strangers who are sticking a sharp object into my body, and it hurts and it's scary. Well, all that is physical evil. But by letting the child have this physical evil, a greater good will be brought about of the child will not get this horrible disease. The child is not able to understand what the good is, but we as adults can. And in the same way, we as adults may not be able to understand in this life what God's reasons are, but God knows the goods that he is pursuing by allowing evil to happen. So that's a general answer, but if you'd like more, check out either shop.catholic.com.
All right. So, Jimmy was saying check out shop.catholic.com. Oh, sorry, Jimmy. You dropped out on us for a second. I apologize.
Or the more specific talk, if God is real, why do I suffer? Which you can get for free at youtube.com/Jimmy Akin.
Yasmin, thank you. Thank you very much. I have to keep going because more calls. Let's go to Brendan in Houston, Texas, watching on YouTube. Brendan, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hello. Thank you for hearing me.
We're glad to have you, Brendan.
Can you
But we don't have we do, but we don't have a lot of time. I apologize for not telling you that, but go right ahead.
Question is real quick. I see the church under attack. I see abortion being pushed. I see so much happening in the culture war and real war, and everybody is asking me to pray for peace. Why shouldn't we be praying for victory?
Well, I don't know who's telling you just pray for peace. I don't think there's anything wrong for praying for victory. I wonder if they may be urging you to pray for peace in particular parts of the world, like, Israel or Ukraine or things like that. And in that case, I would assume that they're trying to be nonpartisan, not supporting one side over another, or not trying to mention a specific way to solve things, but leaving that up to God. What the goal we want to get to is a just peace, but exactly how we get to that goal, human heads may not be able to figure out. So we can leave it to God and just pray for the goal. In the same way, there's nothing wrong with praying for peace. St. Paul talks about how we should pray that we're allowed to live peaceful and quiet lives. And so praying for peace is a good thing, but praying for victory, at least if we're confident our cause is right, and then praying for victory is a good thing too. And, having the church be victorious and proclaiming the gospel and shaping our culture so that it becomes more in line with the values of Christ, all those things are good, and we can't pray for victory in those cases.
What do you think, Brendan?
Thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thanks for waiting. Jimmy Akin's got a new podcast. This is a tough name to remember. The Jimmy Akin Podcast. You can look for it on YouTube, wherever you can look for it wherever you get your podcasts. And it's in addition to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, the podcast Jimmy's been doing for years now, where there are hundreds of mysteries. These will be mysteries of the faith, Jimmy. Would that be a fair way to talk about it?
The new podcast, the Jimmy Akin Podcast, is devoted to mysteries of the faith, whereas Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World is devoted to mysteries in general.
Check them both out, or just find Jimmy. He's on this podcast. You can see him on Cameron Bertuzzi's podcast. That's pretty regular now that you're on Cameron Bertuzzi's podcast.
Well, periodically, but it's not one I'm on every week. There are 6 I'm on every week.
Holy smokes. All right, so listen, if you're listening to a podcast, Jimmy Akin's probably on it. Let's just be honest about that. Jimmy, thanks. I enjoyed the 2 hours. Thanks very much.
My pleasure.
That will do it for us. Don't forget, there's a big sale going on over at shop.catholic.com. 10% off, 20% off, 25%, in some cases more than 25% off. And they've got Carlo's new book there. Check out Carlo Broussard's new book, The Saints Pray for You. All on sale right now at shop.catholic.com. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.